Music is beautiful, but it's not a language. It's an art, but not a form of efficient communication. Right into our framing. First, on how music is perceived as melodical notes, not a language. How does the narrative of music as a universal language act in society? Well, the narrative of music as a universal language can be manifested in a society as music gives emotional connection and touches to everyone. We think that the narrative is no good because it is simply untrue. What is universal language? All people, regardless of mother tongue or fluency, can probably understand the language without a prior training or knowledge. What is our counterfactual here? When music isn't perceived as a universal language, we think that it can be perceived as more domestic. How does this actually manifest? I think that when music is perceived more local and more regional to different countries, they can also integrate music as part of their culture instead of being a universal thing up to a universal thing. Now, right into my first argument, how on music is always on subjective opinion, therefore not a language. This is just going to be a very different. This is just going to be comparing and contrasting between the characteristics of language and music. So first, on how people analyze music differently, music is a vague field with mixed notes, charts, and rhythms that show the high emotion, high intention. That is, every professional musician out there has a different analysis and perception on the song it's on a certain song. That means this is true because the musicians specially craft their music so that people can use the emotion that they feel more deeply to listen to their music. Everyone comes from different grounds and also have different thoughts. Sometimes music isn't up for that much analysis in the first place. Fun notes sound good to ears just for a whole purpose. That's how most of pop music works. Also, second, on the purpose of language, the first point here is on clear communication. It started from grunting and pointing to now as clear language as we have nowadays. What was always there in the first place was making sure the other person listening understands your intentions properly without any sort of mistake. But the thing is, music is always up to the individual's perception of how they analyze the music. Therefore, if your true intention while creating music doesn't carry through properly because it is up for the person's emotion to choose how they analyze the music, we would say that is not a form of clear communication. Therefore, not a universal language because it goes against the characteristics of the fundamentals of language itself. Now, second, even music with lyrics is here because this is just like a very basic example, but a music of what's on a show called AGT. Some singer made a romantic song into like a song for their dead friend because they apparently missed them. Okay, now over onto the characters. Another characteristic of language is because if you learn it properly and speak it properly, then the person hearing it can understand to exactly what you mean. Musicians with years of experience, as I repeat again, always take on different perceptions of music. Examples of this would be world famous violinist Midori Goto constantly take on different variations of Mozart and Paganini. And musics always have different variations because music is linked to emotion itself, not your logical thinking. Because it lacks that logical and communicational factor, it appeals more to logic. It appears more to emotion. We would concede that language is also emotion to a certain extent, but that is only a minimal part of the whole field of language itself. But it is not a universal language to the point that it only holds a partial similarity to language. Think of a Venn diagram. You don't say that contrasted subjects are the exact same thing just because they have one matching point. We would say that language is composed of logos, ethos, pathos, and so many more complicated ways of how you could use to form a connection with language. And for example, if you look at the debate we're doing right now, debate is also another form of language that requires clear communication and understanding. If debate was also perceived as a certain language, debate is here because I have to say something very clearly for the other person to understand. But music is but because music only appeals to emotion, that means it is up to subjective perception, therefore has no firm standards nor rules. Okay, on second point on that language has rules. Look, it has grammar rules. The basic fundamentals of language is that it's a social promise on how we communicate. It's for its effectiveness. That's the basic characteristic of it, and that's why it has numerous vocabulary rules to it. But I can't just start calling British parliamentary AP because I want to. It's not up for me to change. But music, on the other hand, it also has various sectors called contemporary music. Contemporary music is basically classical music from Western art that is basically up to your change on the spot for you to utilize. But because we have structural rules on how to formulate sentences and the tools to use it, that means the language just in the majority of languages characteristics just does not match with that of music because language appeals to effective communication while music appeals to emotion. Now, because this narrative is simply untrue, we simply think one of the most biggest impacts here is that a false narrative is never a good narrative. What is the good of spreading false in our society if it's just going to be a misconception of a field of art itself? Even if we think music is like language, we can just compare it to babies gurgling and tapping at their parents because parents don't know what they're trying to say, so babies are it's basically up for them to think about how a baby is trying to baby wants, but we don't call babies gurgling and tapping people language, do we? This is simply why the narrative is false. Now, on my second argument, how this undermines culture of different music worldwide, now that I have proved that the narrative itself is untrue, let me go on to the practical impacts of this. The premise of this argument is that every country and region has a different type of music that is their own. Music is also a part of culture to these people that specifically holds meaning only towards them. It's simply hard to say that music is a universal language insofar as it is constricted to the culture of music and the people who are listening to it. And it can also be understood by the majority of people in society. This undermines their culture because they can't keep the music to themselves, and it's more of a worldwide thing. Every music has its unique aspect, like different languages put together to simply undermines the purpose of this music. On the impact here, on our worst case, with this narrative, not only that people will blindly subscribe and listen to this music without knowing what the actual meaning and thoughts behind is, they will reduce music to something that they feel entitled to know for two reasons. First, the moment you start calling music a universal language, as we said in our framing, people feel as if they need not any professional nor cultural knowledge on the music itself. They feel entitled to the fact that because this is a universal, everyone has the right to know about their own analysis of the music, and they don't really have to understand the history or the culture of music itself. So 2 points of summary here. First, language isn't about the person listening to make up for. If that were truly the case, then what everyone says in this room can be twisted and understood in the most weird ways, and would perfectly acceptable to call it language. But because of this false narratives and people, because of this universal narrative of language, it has the most negative impact by ruining the culture and integrity and uniqueness of each music and its field. Thank you thank you for listening. So proud to propose.
Okay, I'd like this debate is not about whether a narrative is necessarily true, but is rather about how much narratives can help people experience more pleasure and more net benefit. I think OG forfeits this round as soon as they try to make a divide between language and art, because no matter if language is a language or an art, the increased pool of music for people to choose from inherently benefits people because they can find more happiness and fulfillment in the songs they listen to. This is how O would enter this debate, proud to oppose. 3 notes on setup then. Firstly, how do we characterize the narrative that music is a universal language? 3 things here. Firstly, we tell you that this narrative most likely looks like pushing people to be open to all kinds of music, no matter what country it hails from or what language it is made in. Secondly, we tell you that people are likely to see music as a way to connect with other people that enjoy the same type of music no matter where they are from. This looks like connecting with international friends from all over the world on social media platforms and forming interpersonal connections with them. Thirdly, we tell you that the average citizen in this debate is likely to take more interest from music from other countries, specifically under this motion, because there's an active narrative pushing them to do so. We think that without this narrative, there's no incentive for people to listen to global music, especially when status quo looks like domestic artists performing in their country, mainly doing interviews in their mother tongue and appearing on national or neighborhood media. I think this last characterization is enough to push, to engage with the push from OG that domestic artists will be at an inherent disadvantage. We give you nuanced explanations as to why they are inherently at an advantage without this narrative, which is why this narrative is necessary. But secondly, what is the counterfactual that OG must defend? We think that side government must protect a narrative that music is bound to the area it is created. For example, if I am born and placed in Korea, I can only listen to K-pop because this narrative occurs naturally. Then thirdly, what is our burden in this debate? We think that there are benefits of the narrative as a the narrative that music as a universal language, but our ultimate burden in this debate is to prove to you why this narrative is not worth opposing. That is to say, if we prove to you why the harms of OG tries to push to you are not very important, we ought to take this debate. First substantive then, on spreading more diverse music. Firstly, how do we necessarily facilitate the spread of more music on a global level? As we proved to you in our setup, I think that this narrative that languages and styles of music does not equate to how much you can enjoy this music is necessarily to push people out of their comfort zones. That is to say, people usually enjoy the things that they have familiarized from when they are younger, such as nursery rhymes, languages that their parents and teachers spoke to them in, etc. Which is why without this narrative, we would posit that the average reasonable person would be scared to engage with music that is in a foreign language. With this narrative, you're able to push that there is no need to be hesitant to engage with diverse music, especially when it is so good. Secondly, to some extent, music is a universal language, which is to say mainstream music has become popular outside of music has become popular outside of the style and language it uses. A good example is K-pop, Celtic Woman, or Indelia's music, which gains extreme popularity globally because of this narrative. Then secondly, why is it a benefit for listeners to be aware of more music? We think that music is impactful in the way that it gives a lot of enjoyment and fulfillment to normal people. The average citizen listens to music and enjoys music in the car, listens to music in their own downtime because they find so much enjoyment to this. So when we give you this narrative that people are able to choose from whatever language they want, whatever style of music they want, then people can choose what music they want to listen to, and they're like exposed to more diverse forms of music, which inherently means that there will be a higher quality of music, or they'll find something that they more subjectively enjoy in this. But then secondly, we think that this narrative is similar to globalization in the scope that if you take a wider base for people to choose from, they are able to optimize their own benefit and create more utilitarian good for themselves. Of course, the impacts of globalization are much more practical in set, but we think the benefits of this argument is that people can actively choose what they want to listen to instead of being forced to listen to what's only in their country. But thirdly, even if people don't always listen to music because they're forced to listen to it at some point, music is played at stores and backgrounds of movies and backgrounds of social media and etc. We think that most people are exposed to music all of the time, and therefore it is a benefit to have a diversity of songs. How does this engage with OG's case then? OG tells us all of these very nuanced things about how music can be overanalyzed and is a language and things like that. We think that this debate is not about the word language, but instead is a word universal. I think no matter on what side you have, people will not overanalyze music. They don't need to fully understand the context of the music was made in order to enjoy the music. The biggest practical harm or the biggest practical benefit we give to you in today's debate is that we increase the enjoyment of these people, not that some overanalyzing things or things like that. But then secondly, on our second substantive about spreading cultural awareness, we think there are three levels to this argument. Firstly, there's a narrative of showcasing diverse cultures across different areas if this narrative is prevalent in today's society. It is only when music is seen as something that is a universal language that can reach a wider demographic of individual listeners that is able to maximize the power and ability to showcase and spread these diverse cultures across the globe. That is this, for example, Jake, a very popular artist, seeks to collaborate and with diverse and smaller artists from lesser known backgrounds. Other mainstream artists, part of pop culture, want to showcase not only their own cultures, but also collaborate and bring surface to those culture of lesser known ideas. I think a very prevalent example here is like Bruno Mars collaborating with Rose, who is a K-pop artist, or like different pop artists trying to collaborate with different Asian artists because these music industries are getting very, very large, right? The impact here is that we uplift smaller cultures while promoting the narrative of diversity. This is important because it is only when different genres in music of different countries are able to surface in mainstream media that we get things such as other parts of culture that are able to be focused in and the interest of global media. That is to say, when that other parts of culture are able to be highlighted at the same example or same time as using popular attention. For example, K-pop was able to spread globally, reaching its influence to mainstream media, and therefore at the same time able to showcase other parts of South Korean culture, such as traditional Korean cultures, K-drama, and Korean landmarks. I think this is the idea of soft power because music is such a low barrier to entry. If you listen to some Korean music, then you get interested in these idols, and when you get interested in these idols, you get to watch reality TV shows about them, and when you're interested in that, you get to watch K-drama shows, and you get to enjoy Korean food, which leads to a deeper understanding of the culture. We think that the comparative is that government side does not have this at all, and they only know what is going on in their country, and they only know the culture of their country. Thirdly, then, why is this argument debate winning? We prove to you that a benefit that is exclusive to music, which is that it is simply able to reach a wider audience and has a lower barrier to entry, and through that, it is able to increase cultural diversity and bring a light to smaller countries, even in mainstream media. This is a benefit that is important in this debate for the following two reasons. Firstly, it is something that is exclusively able to do just by music because it is factually just has the power to resonate with completely different audiences globally. I don't think a lot of people just watch K-dramas by themselves because they need to translate, they need to do all these things. But music, if you listen to it once, you're able to listen to it again, and you can listen to this whenever or wherever you want. And two, this means that we increase the exposure to lesser known identities, and that levels the playing field of mainstream media, even for smaller countries from Korea or from other countries that are not part of the Western pop base. Very proud to oppose.
I'd like to thank the previous.
OO tries to distort or counterfactual and creates a world we don't support. I want to re-clarify how our world looks and actually manifests in society. First of all, we can see to extend that music outside of your own language won't be able to actually work because you're going to be more limited towards your own language within your music. I'm going to prove to you why this isn't as much of a harmful thing later on in my speech. Secondly, however, we think that the main impact on our side of the house is that people listen to music that they truly like, whether or not how this is actually perceived in society. If the music's message fits them and it gives them mental comfort, that's the music that people will consume under on OG's world. Without when there's a narrative that music is a universal language and people listen to music worldwide and have a diverse taste, we think that this is more harmful because it just loses the true meaning of music. I'll explain to this more later on in my speech. First of all, I want to compare to this with O's main benefit that they wanted to talk about, which is people being able to access music worldwide. However, just because music is more diverse and people have a more diverse taste, that doesn't mean that doesn't lead to a positive benefit in the first place as well. When you listen to music from different countries or different backgrounds, you don't understand or resonate with the music that you're actually listening to in the first place. For example, if foreigners listen to K-pop music, most of the time you just like the K-pop idol because he looks handsome or these kind of or the melody just looks good. These kind of things are obviously things that people focus more on if you try to resonate with music that's outside of your culture in the first place. You focus more on the rhythmic flows and more technical things of music in the first place while not resonating to actual message. That's the most important thing in the first place as well. Is within a music is a powerful tool that people use to share their information. Within an opening option sites undermines the whole point of this in the first place as well. I want to secondly talk about domestic artists as well. Cherry picks examples like artists like Rose, where other domestic cultures that aren't in the US are highlighted on a global scale. However, within this norm has done more harm than good in the first place on a global scale as well. Note that while people consume K-pop, society doesn't have as much interest on music from Indonesia, Oceania, Middle East Asia, and so many regions around the world. These kind of musics aren't highlighted even in their own domestic countries in the first place as well. Why is this true? Because people pick things like K-pop and people like Western music already took in their pie from their own domestic market as well. Why is this so harmful for these individuals? When there's a narrative that music is a universal language and they also take their pie within the market, these artists don't probably can't talk about their own stories as well. They want to come up with more majority stories that are more majority liked. Obviously, these kind of artists can talk about their stories and actually earn money and give an actual good impact to society. I think that the main impact of this argument is that even if there's certain artists that are getting highlighted on their own house, so many artists are getting harmed, so many domestic artists are getting harmed, and their stories are gonna get undermined and even not shared in the first place because of the reason that there's gonna be diverse consumption of like K-pop or diverse consumption of Western music worldwide. We thought there are only going to be the minority of domestic artists that are actually going to succeed. Obviously there are going to be more people that are going to get harmed in the first place as well. Secondly, they talk about the narrative looks like it pushes people to explore more music. One issue with this statement. First of all, just because people perceive music as universal, this isn't a proper incentive for them just to listen to different songs from different culture. This is all on the same side. This is because of a narrative that music isn't a universal doesn't deter people from listening music as well. We know what this is true, that people actually resonate more and listen to music that actually fits their message and fits into their stories in the first place, which gives equal chances to global music and people in a domestic scale as well. Simply because there are bigger incentives to listen to music. It's either because advertisement, it's an OST for a movie you like, or your favorite artist that sings like it. We don't listen to various kinds of music just because there's a universal narrative. We listen to music because things are that follow and resonate with their message more, and because it's interesting and unique to these people. If people feel that it is a universal thing, but more unique culture exchange would only exists on our side of the house. Secondly, I want to talk about why music is why music is a language, and also why this is also an important part of today's debate. Opening side tries to talk about why whether or not music is a universal language is that important in this debate in the first place. However, we think that having a false narrative is truly harmful in the first place as well. We think that music being a universal language, whether or not this is true, should also be one of the main metrics of the debate, which is why my first speaker is already still relevant in my debate as well. Judge, moving on. Leader of opposition talks about soft power, but soft power only works if that culture is unique to the country. K-pop is soft power because it belongs to Korea and has a very distinct idol culture to it. The moment it earns the title of universal, you lose that advantage of soft power as well. So even if the countries like South Korea, their world isn't that beneficial in the first place as well. Secondly, music is a language that's only valuable to the point that people enjoy. They don't need to analyze it. That's the point that leader of opposition comes up and says in today's debate. I think that this is proof why they really don't care about respecting their music nor culture. Basically, what they're saying is that as long as people enjoy and understand it on a shallow level, that just serves all the purpose that music does. We would disagree to this extremely strongly. We would say that music needs a more cultural connotation in order for it to get both interesting and people belong to a distinct culture getting respected in the first place as well. Within our world gives more respect to these individuals as well, and people understand and consume music on a more deeper scale as well. Which is why people can actually listen to the benefits and get more benefits from music only on our side of the house. With that in mind, I want to move on to my third argument on why this lowers the quality of music. My third argument is that even if music is a language, why having this as a narrative is harmful. With the narrative that music is based on a universal language, it's much further difficult for artists to actually make music that's only based on their own stories. I want to expand more on PM on how this narrative actually manifests in society. With the narrative that music is a universal language, you have to touch and sympathize with the majority of the public. The fact that this is a language means that you should apply to everyone universally. What this does is that artists now can't focus on their unique experiences and thoughts and build music out of thought in the first place as well, because it's difficult for a majority to understand and feel their emotions to the fullest extent. With that in mind, I want to tell you now that music is for the public and not for yourself onto opening opposite side of the house. Music is highly personal as well. We think you should have music towards yourself and based on your own stories. Note that this harm is exacerbated only under on team opening opposite side of the house, because domestic artists now have to appeal to the majority of public to actually share their stories. It was already artists like K-pop artists and already music from the Western society has taken away already so much pie of what they should have at least within their domestic market. We did have this in the first place, which is why music can't be highly personal in these kind of cases and actually give value of music to the market as well. Oversized worlds limits the capability for music to only be for the majority of the public. We did highly personal stories and stories that only believe in your own people, only in your region can feel to. Is the music and is exclusive on our side of the house, because our counterfactual doesn't have this narrative that music is a universal language. We had unique benefits on why music being on why people can access music and feel the benefits of music on a way more deeper scale on our side of the house. Lastly, we done this argument solely wins us the debate, because we tell to you why even if music is a language, it's more harmful and that it creates backlash to the whole industry of music, not only to the domestic market, and not only that, it undermines culture to everyone in general society. For these reasons, so proud to propose. Thank you.
I'd like to thank the previous speaker.
Opening opposition's burden in this debate is not to prove why we somehow magically uplift every single culture through music as a universal language, but it is the fact that we simply give diverse cultures, the most niche cultures, a chance to use music as a forms of media to spread across the international globe and reach mainstream media. That is the unique benefit that we get under our side of the house at the end of my speech. Before anything, a few strategic observations in my speech. First, note here, what is the win condition of this debate? This debate is obviously not whether music is actually a universal language, and also not whether the language is good or bad. It's about the narrative and the propensity of it to be understood, used, and believed by musicians, consumers, listeners, and the industry. And this is important because literally their entire PM speech spent like more than half their speech trying to prove to you why music cannot be used as a universal language, and then their deputy speaker comes in and tries to prove why the language is not going to be accurate in conveying like the deeper meaning of music. We agree, maybe this might be true in their best case scenario, but the reality is that does not matter at the point in which the way that people perceive this narrative as society is different, and at the point in which under their side of the house, the narrative becomes something that only creates further division in cultures. That is what we prove to you. But secondly, we think that O's responses are just incredibly shallow. Our biggest benefit is that music is a distinct good in the way that people enjoy melodies and enjoy instruments and enjoy people's voices. Therefore, we would argue that most Koreans also don't understand the inherent message of different K-pop songs, but simply just enjoy the music for what it is. And we think that kind of happiness derived from music is an inherent good in this debate. But further, OG's engagement with our case just assumes that translation does not exist. That is to say that people are extremely invested in K-pop, and if they wanted to understand the lyrics, maybe they're listening to the song, so they translate the lyrics or try to learn Korean. This is the kind of cultural exposure pushed by our first speaker, which does not exist under OG. So now a few direct line-by-line responses. First of all, they say that you have that more niche, lesser-known cultures of music are undermined under our world. Two responses to this. First of all, we think that our first speaker preempts this narrative from the beginning of her speech. We tell you that domestic audiences inherently have a foot up against international artists because they have more exposure domestically, so interviews in their home language, coverage by media or reality TV shows, or shows in their domestic country, and etc. But secondly, we don't understand why this is necessarily a harm. That is to say that if Western music and K-pop takes over cultural and niche music, then this is because more people enjoy these types of music inherently, which is to suggest that through music, though music is subjective, we would argue that more popular music is a greater quality because a majority of these people enjoy this much more. Therefore, we think that audience should be free to enjoy the types of music they want, and this is not worth restricting the people's freedom for. But in my extension, I'll be proving to you how to some extent we get better cultural exposure. But secondly, let me weigh this and just prove to you why culture and the exposure of music is just much more important than people understanding the meaning of music. And that was the biggest case pushed to you by opening government. Note here that the exclusive role and ability of music is that they're able to spread culture that cuts across geographic barriers, cuts across social barriers, and cuts across cultural barriers. That is to say that people can just enjoy music because it sounds cool. They can just enjoy the different and cool instruments that they might not have listened to otherwise in their neighborhood, That is to say that under our side of the house, we get better culture. And the reason that that is important because it is exclusively through music, which is just people hearing cool sounds at its core, that is able to spread the kind of culture and get people interested in other parts of the culture to learn more into that under our side of the house. Note here that the comparative of GovBench is that you have literature, like literally anything else, to convey a deeper meaning if you wanted to. We do not see why you need to necessarily oppose this narrative just because you want people to understand the deeper meaning. We're willing to trade that off if that is our worst case. But thirdly, they say that we lose soft power as soon as we name these musics to be universal. I don't think that OG understands the characterization of which this debate is set in. Korea's music was able to gain so much soft power because people felt okay with engaging with this type of music and did not feel hesitant to engage with another country's music. We think that this narrative is the entire reason why countries are able to share their soft power. OG causes tension in their case by claiming that our narrative inherently goes against the goal that we want. We think they cannot squirrel around and responding to us and had to bite the bullet and say that their world has no cultural understanding. But quickly, I just want to rebuild on our second argument on cultural diversity. We tell you that the harm under their world is cultural homogeneity. We would flip what they say about minority countries because on their world, you worsen cultural homogeneity because the only culture that has a wide platform to spread influence on is just Western music using Western mainstream media. On their world, that kind of disparity is exacerbated. But I just want to clarify, at least under our world, even though we don't have the burden to prove why we uplift all cultures with music in this narrative, but what we do manage to prove to you at the end of my speech is that these cultures, these diverse minority cultures, at least have a chance to rise through mainstream media using the algorithm, because it is only through this narrative that people are willing to listen to these diverse musics. So now moving on to my extension on inclusive and holistic music industry. And the premise here is that Gov's world creates a narrative of music being limited to only certain cultures, which creates a narrative of cultural divide, only allowing the most powerful mainstream culture like Western media to prevail. First layer then, we have increased choice for both artists and listeners of music. Under our side, we prove to you how we get increased choice at the point in which I'm living in Korea and I'm being recommended a lot of music from like Germany or like some random artist in Madagascar. So it is with our narrative of universality, that is when you get the algorithm and users recommending globally diverse musics of these cultures. Note here that the comparative under OG is that people feel as though they're limited to the kind of music that is made closest to them. That is because at the point in which it is not universal, but instead something that is more limited to your own culture, they literally concede to this. Why then is this harmful? Because under their world, it creates a narrative of division. The fact that you're only allowed to listen to your own kind of music that is closer to you because that is the most accessible music and you're not even exposed to it and you're not even aware of different music in the first place, that is when you're not able to when you're not able to have that kind of spread of culture. You're only limited to your own culture, not knowing others. And at that point, when there is that divide, it is only under their world where only the most powerful countries have the ability to spread their culture simply because they're powerful. The comparative under our world is that we have greater cohesion. We think that we pull back a very important point from Rachel's setup here, which is to say that when people can enjoy different music and get involved with different artists and bands, they can engage with people that are not from their own countries. This is inherently true because when people engage with their artists in diverse ways, i.e. social media or concerts or talking about their favorite music to start conversation. But even if this setup does not exist, people want to get involved with culture that is part of a song. Understand that Celtic music became very important globally with people involved with cosplaying and fantasy books and roles. This caused people to understand Celtic culture because they enjoyed this type of music so much. This is further the case with J-pop and K-pop when people learn about Korean or Japanese food and culture in order to feel closer. We tell you that cultural inclusion ought to be one of the most heavily weighted benefits in this debate because it is extremely exclusive to our side. So proud to oppose.
OJ only talks about why this narrative is not true,
our side, the schools and government, is going to focus on how this narrative becomes a new form of modern cultural imperialism that is driving the homogenization of cultures and assimilation of minority cultures in our era of cultural globalization. When music is a way to assert and validate one's identity, we showed on how this narrative leads to either the monopolization or of this right, or B, the homogenization of it, which is to the determinant of all countries, including the majority, okay? So first, let's analyze the problem that's actually going on in the status quo. The problem is that most of the music being listened to is by things like American artists from the Western community, right? Well, so B, let's talk about the implications of this narrative. First, we think this narrative implies that music is being enjoyed by anyone because, of course, music is a universal language. And second, people are listening to the right music right now because right now in the status quo, people are usually listening to the Western music. But this narrative is just simply perpetuating this situation because people are saying like, hey, like music is global. This means that people in like China, people in India are still listening to Travis Scott. They are still listening to artists that I'm enjoying to listening to. Okay, so our alternative is to just let things stay as is with no narrative that's like telling people like, oh, you should listen to this music, oh, you should listen to that music. Okay, going more into rebuttals, the opposition talks about how there's going to be more diverse music, and how like under our side people are going to be scared to actually try listening to music. First of all, I think there are many alternate narratives that tell you that diversity is good, right? For example, in social studies class, you learn that you should respect all other cultures. So that's why I don't think the impact of their argument necessarily is brought up that well. Second, I think this isn't exclusive because people are already aware that different genres and types of music exist. It's just that there's nothing that's pushing them to actually to listen to that kinds of music. Okay. Okay, they also talk about how like people are going to feel limited. First rebuttal, just that we throw in the word universal into this narrative, it doesn't necessarily mean that it fosters a wider audience. If you think that music is enjoyed universally, then you'll probably make the subconscious assumption that people in foreign countries are going to enjoy it. I'm not sure how this subconscious decision is suddenly going to lead to more people listening to music eventually, okay? Second, even if this is true, I'm not sure if it is such a great impact as they claim. I think this debate is more about social values rather than the artistic values or things like how good you are at making music that they talk about, okay? Alright, they also talk about how like they create a collective amount of music from like different cultures and we can create like perfect harmony. No, I don't think this isn't going to happen because there's already dominant amount of Western music and entertainment. This ultimately won't work because people all feel okay with listening to the music that they like listening to, which is why I think that they're more likely to listen to Western music. Okay? So first extension on how there's like a new form of colonialism. I think the premise for this argument of extension is that we are currently living in a world of extreme globalization, right? So let's talk about minority songs for a second. People lose the incentive to listen to minority songs on the website because we believe that since music is something universal, people will believe that minority music is just going to look the same, right? Because music is like something that's universal. I think that people are going to say, hey, what's the difference if like everyone's the same, everyone's universal, and things like that. However, many of these songs target core social issues made by minorities, such as the loss of habitat, religion, and one's connection to nature, right? People can make music about like how they lost families in the war, and that can just be ignored by the social media because they believe that everything's the same because it's universal. Okay, let's talk about majority songs. Okay, the public believes that because music is a universal language, the majority songs are going to be enjoyed by minorities as well, which is not true, which is bad because it leads majorities to think that hey, like minorities are doing fine. I have no reason to listen to their songs either. Okay, what's the impact of this? First of all, the majority loses the incentive to learn about minority songs and their cultures because, of course, music's universal and therefore the same. Second, minorities lose the ability to portray important messages within their songs since the audience is limited, as there's no incentive for larger audience to have to actually listen to what they say. This means that they lose the opportunity to talk about the community that they lived in. They lose the opportunity to talk about like how bad their childhood was, right? Thirdly, assumption pressures. Okay, what do I mean by this? This means that minorities feel like their cultures or values in these songs hold less value and therefore assimilate into the majority. Okay, because the mainstream culture is going to lead to homogenization, which is going to lead to cultural extinction, and this is how minority cultures are dying in the era of globalization of music, which crowds out minority songs. songs. So yes, music is very universal and it's very important, but we think that because of this, we should oppose the narrative that this music is universal, because all the minorities are going to be caught up in the wave saying that, like, hey, music is universal and it's going to lead to cultural extinction. Why is this a unique argument? This is because OG only briefly talks about how their side supports cultural values, okay? This wins over the opening teams because we talk more about the way broader social impacts that this brings, where they only talk about the few people listening to like K-pop or like Bruno Mars and whatever, okay? Second extension on how music creators, okay? Under the narrative that music is a universal language, bigger and maybe every artist has to conform under the big topic of being universal, okay? This means that they are forced to be universally accessible. There's no more music about poverty and deforestation, more about universally setting, more things that are going to attract public attention, okay? The impacts here are that many minorities are going to pour out their social messages into this music, okay? The OG already said that there's going to be less diversity, but let's take this one step further. I think that this just simply destroys minority content, not like the personal message you want to portray. This just simply gets rid of minority content because it lacks attention, and why is this bad? It's because minorities lack a voice in the globalized society, okay? Thirdly, this means that the minorities that actually hopped into the music industry in the very first place because of this narrative are going to fail to achieve their social message, okay? So what's your counterfactual? I think we protect the stakeholders that actually make the music and they feel more free to express their actual artistic intellect, okay? We win over the opening teams because the artists are the ones that actually we should give the utility to make the music that they want to make, right? Third and final extension on how music is actually exclusive. There are many things like censorship and things like rural areas and super wealthy and industrialized people and there are also people that just cannot afford streaming services, right? Which means that it's principally unjust to label music as a universal language, because white music, we can't say that white people music is accessible for the universal and everybody are like clear victims of colonialism, and for pop culture music, like Taylor Swift, Tyler, and Kendrick, they're all American artists, right? Most popular music is Western. This means that this doesn't include minorities and etc., which means that it's factually untrue to label music as a universal language. Because we respect the utility for artists and consumers to enjoy music, for these reasons we are proud to propose.
Good morning or evening, esteemed judges and fellow attendees. I'm Theodore, representing the opposition. So to begin with, I will start with revising some of our debate setup, and then moving on to my argument, rebuttals, and then finally a comparison of all houses. So to begin with, we would like to say that our burden is to prove that this narrative is able to bridge the gap between everyone internationally and bring net benefits and satisfaction to the global community. Now, we would like to again say that it is important to keep in mind that this is a narrative debate. This means that the narrative, and that we would like to say that the narrative that music is a universal language encourages people to explore and appreciate the musical traditions to different countries. And therefore, that is why we believe that some of the houses and their points wouldn't stand. And I will come back to that in my house comparison. So moving on to my arguments. To begin with, I would like to extend on saying that this narrative actually makes people emotionally connect with music and bridges the cross-culture and empathy. So basically, the idea of music as a universal language encourages people to focus through shared emotional experience, and therefore this bridges the cultural gap and make people more inclusive, make people feel more inside this sphere of music, and therefore lead to a better global community. And this links to my second argument, which says that this narrative actually helps with worldwide community building. For example, this narrative brings communities together, creates spaces where diverse groups can celebrate commonalities. This is especially visible in events like concerts, festivals, where language barriers are actually thrown away and is irrelevant, as people all come together just to share this universal language of music. And that, for example, the songs from the U.S. Civil Rights Movement, like "We Shall Overcome," resonates globally and is being adopted by protesters worldwide. And therefore, this is why we think that this narrative can actually foster a worldwide community building. And why is this all important? Well, in this era of migration in multicultural societies, it provides the framework for people from different cultures to come together, for different cultures to form a group and feel more together as a community. And why is this exclusive? Well, in the government bench's world, they undervalue music's role in promoting unity and community, as music operates directly on a universally human level. for example, emotion, rhythm, and shared experience that will never change because we ourselves, we are human beings, and that is why that these arguments that I just said is exclusive to only the opposition bench. Now, before I continue, is there any POIs? Well, I will continue with some of my rebuttals. Now, I would like to first say, the CG has stated that this narrative could have cultural imperialism and Western and only focus on Western and majority stuff. While we don't deny that Western music has a significant presence, this narrative is not inherently a Western. And not just that, non-Western music has also gained a lot of popularity due to this narrative. For example, one of the best examples is K-pop. Another one is J-pop. These are not specifically Western music and Western influences. However, these non-Western music still has a great impact and still led to a lot of, and that's why, and this narrative still led to a lot of benefits in those areas. And not just that, our opponents have also stated that social media could twist the facts into making that only in the Western majority shows. However, we would like to say that this is actually irrelevant, as this issue is about the social media and not this narrative. That's why that we think this argument doesn't stand, as it's not about this narrative, and that we are only talking about whether this narrative benefits or not. Moving on, one of the biggest arguments is that the minority gets thrown away. However, this narrative actually highlights and celebrates diverse music traditions, as the narrative acknowledges that the music across cultures, and that means that their arguments miss and don't stand, and that their arguments are factually untrue, and that's why this narrative actually benefits the most people. And now, moving on to the comparison of houses. The OG has stated that this music is not as efficient as a language, and has focused a lot on the definitions of music, and that music doesn't stand in a big analysis. However, we would like to agree with the opening opposition that this is a narrative debate, which means that we are not debating on whether music is a universal language or not. We are simply debating on why this narrative has a better benefit on the world around us. And therefore, that is why we think that the open in government is out of the window. And now, moving on to the opening opposition. They have made strong points talking about music diversity and the music being spread around the globe, and that their burden is to prove why the narrative is not worth opposing. However, they only talk about music being diverse and spread around the world, and doesn't link directly back to the social impacts and the social benefits that the music had compared to our. And therefore, their burden fails to extend on the actual benefits of this narrative. Therefore, we would win over their burden by showing that not only this narrative doesn't have any harm, but also showing why this narrative actually has its own benefits. And therefore, that is why we think that our house stands the best, and that's why we are more than proud to oppose. Thank you.
I think calling this quote-unquote globalization of music as a universal language is something that cannot persist. I'll give you some basic recharacterization from Tegu, and then I'll give you some direct rebuttals. I think both OO and CO pushes the narrative that people, firstly, don't have to fully understand the deeper meaning of music, and push an example of a diehard like K-pop fan learning Korean. And secondly, that people are going to be incentivized to pick and choose whatever music they want because music is seen as a universal language in their side. To responses. Firstly, I think regardless of people just liking percussion of a rap song, analyzing music and fully understanding the deeper meaning behind music is more important. Why? We tell you that analyzing music and understanding music is a window into the human soul, right? We tell you that understanding the messages of music help us explain why we feel certain things and give us opportunities for self-reflection. I think they sound super philosophical, but things like rap sounds rap sounds super cool, but we still learn things like living in the ghettos and surviving by going from rags to riches. I think these are the messages that are mostly conveyed by minorities, and opposition kind of gets rid of this principle that minorities can follow. Secondly, I think people would rather still stick with what they already know than trying to listen to new music. Why? Tegu explains to you that basic music streaming like services like Spotify is already Western. He tells you that the majority of music is already Western, right? He tells you that even if there's a collected genre of music, Western music is still going to dominate this universal language that they call music. This is the sort of world that both opening and closing opposition runs under. We don't think this is going to work in the long term. Few direct rebuttals. Firstly, closing opposition basically talks about how they make people emotionally bridge with music. They talk about community building as a main principle of their arguments, right? But we think we can also provide this exclusively. We think we have things like concerts, world tours, etc., etc. Taylor Swift like gathers so many crowds when she does one single world tour. I think these sorts of like big concerts and world tours is something that also unites a lot of people in the same way that they unite people with this like genre of music that they call universal. If opposition cares about forming bonds in music, we already achieved this. If they want to sell what they're saying, they need a new and more exclusive way of community building. And very briefly, Judge, countries like North Korea is excluded in this collective bridging of music since nothing can go in or out of their nation, right? We tell you that we still respect North Korean music since YouTube and like other streaming platforms actually leak traditional North Korean music. I think we do something better to preserve this uniqueness of disconnected nations. Opposition can't really achieve this since everything has to be connected in some way or another under this main principle of being a universal language. I think the rest of the points that CEO made is basically all subsections that opening opposition basically covered. I don't think they should deserve the win in today's debate. Two main clashes here. Firstly, about which side better protects the recognition of minority artists and culture. I think OG does mention the fact about like culture and exclusivity, but I think Tegu tells you more. He tells you that a new wave of colonialism and imperialism as a whole emerges in the case that music is seen as something that is universal and international. Tegu tells you what? He tells you that minorities from the get-go have less publication and identity alongside big Western stars like Taylor Swift, for example. It tells you that there's less incentive to listen to minority music because universal music covers that general census of everyone as a whole over the specific messages or types of things that minority artists actually want to convey in our world. So how do we sell this better over any other argument in today's debate? We sell this by telling you that we covered that big topic of appealing to our audiences with a certain message that matters and a message that is valuable. I can easily tell you that once music is something that isn't seen as something that's like universal or an international language, minority artists still have a voice because their own music is something that is exclusive in their culture that tells a unique message compared to opposition's world in which there is no exclusivity and only conformity. If opposition can't really answer this in today's debate, they can't win today's debate. I think under the narrative that opposition pushes, cultural assimilation also plays out. Tegu's the only one who tells you about cultural assimilation, right? We tell you that in their model, minorities feel like their cultures or values and songs hold less value and therefore assimilate into the majority, since the big majority is more about a collective idea of a universal and international message over the recognition of unique cultures and messages. I think cultural appropriation is something that can also follow out here. I think a lot of cultures are still stolen, but in the same world in which there's a universal language called music, I think music in itself will basically steal every other culture and combine everything into one big chunk of music. I don't think this music would actually have a personality nor matter in today's society because it actually doesn't tell a specific message, right? For example, minorities actually talk about deforestation, they talk about poverty, they talk about people getting killed by riots, and etc. Rather, in this big world of universal music, the only thing that's going to be talked about is a big jumble and like multiplication of every single culture there is into one tiny song. I don't think this is going to tell any message in the long run. Second clash on which side better preserves the prime definition of music and the perception of music. I think Tegu tells you the most about music creators, right? Nobody talked about music creators in this debate today. He talks about music creators as a stakeholder in our world. Under the narrative that music is a universal language, bigger and maybe even like bigger and like every artist has to conform under the big topic of being universal. This basically has to be universally accessible. Every music has to be universally accessible. No more music about poverty and deforestation. I think this is something that he also covers. There will be no specific music that actually covers a unique genre that someone wants to cover. Two impacts that he introduces. Firstly, many minorities pour out their personal messages into the music that we just talked about. This is something that they basically ignore. Secondly, similarly about our model in the counterfactual. We protect the stakeholders that make the music, and they feel more free to express their like artistic intellect because they know that their music can get a certain identity in the striving music industry. This is super unique because we are the only team that talks about the artists themselves. I think this is something that you should cover in today's debate. We also talk about how music is super exclusive. Censorship, and access to North Korea, rural areas with no radios, super wealthy and industrialized countries where people can afford every streaming service in our world is something that's super exclusive to everybody. I think white music is something that's super exclusive to America and those Western countries. We can't say that white people music is accessible and universal for everybody when there are clear victims of colonialism from the British or the American. I think these are the things that basically get neglected at the end of the day in today's debate, and I think this is something that we actually bring to light in today's debate. Tegu gives you the most amount of extensions on why music is something that should be covered as something that's not universal but unique to every country, unique to every minority, unique to every person. I think music is something that's unique and something that's super specific to every single person in this world, and for these reasons, more than proud to propose. Thank you.
As the last opposition speaker for the closing opposition today, I will mechanize everything. I will also talk about the unique impacts that come on one side, and lastly talk about what the point of music is actually all about. First, on the proposition side, they talk about how people lose incentive to listen to music because it's universalized. Now today I will be first I will like to talk about my main argument for this. I have two main arguments. First, this will broaden music horizons. The idea of music as a universal language encourage people to explore the wide range of genres, styles from various different cultures instead of limiting their listening to familiar sounds or individuals may feel inspired to seek out the music from different backgrounds, leading to a broader appreciation of global musical diversity. What's the impact of this? First of all, the first impact would be this exploration actually allows people to have the curiosity and desire to learn, and having their incentive to listen to a wide array of music. For example, the first genre. The branches within pop. Of course, there's more than one, as we talked about before. J-pop, and also K-pop right now, which is the two big ones. And that basically these two branched out from the pop music, meaning that somebody or a group of people must have listened to K-pop, must have listened to pop itself. For example, very famous artists like Ariana Grande, Taylor Swift, Sabrina Carpenter, and branched out to their own, adding their own unique culture. They're adding their own unique sound, beats, and notes to make this music sound so unique. And the reason why it's so unique is because because these people have added their own ideas, so that if we universalize this music as a language, it would not actually remove anything from it. Instead, it might even add more. Second of all, I like to talk about the sharing experience. And my argument for this is that music actually often serves as a medium for shared experiences, bringing a lot of people together through a lot of different events. And that the idea that the music is a universal language actually will allow this to become even stronger. Now, this encourages people to engage in the music as a way to connect with people, regardless of cultural background. For example, I, as a Chinese person, or I, as a Singaporean person, can listen to K-pop and connect with somebody who is Korean. Although we might not be able to understand each other, through things like the songs and music, we're able to understand what we both enjoy and what we both like. And the impact of this, first of all, is the sense of communication. The community can actually increase with people's incentive to listen to music as they participate in a lot of different experiences that celebrate diverse musical expressions. Second of all, they talk about I will be talking about how opposition sides showcases their diverse perspectives. First, I would like to talk about the culture differences. As I talked before a lot in my first point, different genres, instrument music, and styles reflect the values, histories, and experiences of specific communities. For example, in K-pop, they like to use a lot of the drums. They like to use the loud beats and the on and off beats to make the music sound very groovy. Second of all, in music, for example, like the emo or music, which, for example, I will just say Billie Eilish, they use the piano, softer tones to showcase their ideas and emotions. So it's not just because of the lyrics that will change the whole course of the music. Yes, the lyrics are quite important. However, we tend to listen to music based on the beat, based on what the sound sound and instruments are used, and that through in different traditions, different musical instruments come out and play, and that different instruments and different lyrics can allow this music to showcase something really different, allowing the cultural differences and nuances to show out throughout the music. Third of all, I would like to talk about the how people about the opposite side and what the impact is about getting involved through the culture through music. First of all, when people engage to culture primarily through music, they would when they get through with these musics, they will be able to understand, because for example in China there's a lot of there's a lot of traditional music, for example the guzheng, which is something where it's basically a piano but is made based off strings, and this sound will be so different from any other music that you're able to express something completely different. And even if let's just say a very famous music piece, which is Golden Hour by Jake, if I use the guzheng vs the harp, although they're both stringed instruments, they will sound completely different, and the tone and the expression that the idea that you want to express through these two instruments will be completely different. Lastly, I will talk about how even if you don't buy any of the arguments, we talk about the social values, which is what the prop likes to vote about or likes to talk about. First, the culture, respect, and authenticity. The opposition actually re-emphasized on the importance of recognizing the unique cultures of music, and that by arguing that the music is not universally understood, we call for deeper appreciation for the culture's context which the music emerges from, which includes things like understanding the historical and political nuances which is behind different musical genres. The impact of this is that this fosters a sense of culture of respect, authenticity, promoting the awareness and sensitivities towards different cultures. The impact is a twofold. One, it not only enriches individuals to understand the diverse musical forms, but it also discourages appropriation and misrepresentation, leading to more respect to global diversity. Lastly, I don't think prop understands what music is really about. Lastly, I will talk about what music is all about. Music is about the expression of emotion, culture, identity, heritage, social connection, and also social communities, and also, last of all, entertainment and enjoyment. At its core, music is a source of entertainment and its enjoyment. It's accompanied with celebrations, gatherings, leisure activities, providing joy and pleasure to people of all ages. The impact of this is that the entertainment value helps to shape cultural different experiences, personal memories, and also enriching lives, providing soundtracks to everyday moments. And that we believe that on our side, this is a narrative debate, so we only need to we have to prove that the benefits of music as a universal language is more than its harm, and that I believe that on the opposition side we prove more on this. And for all the reasons above, this is why we believe that we strongly oppose this argument.